All right, guys, here's the second part of lesson 5 that was presented in class on Thursday, October 22nd. So we started lesson 5 with the work time B, analyze a model assignment in Canvas. We first read the excerpt from Percy Jackson, pages 206 to 211, to remind us of the scene that the model narrative used. Then we came down here and everyone made a copy of the model narrative so that we could analyze it. We were looking for parts of the model narrative that establish the new narrator, which is the new demigod character that has been created and inserted into a scene from Percy Jackson, and then highlighting paragraphs that were borrowed from the novel. So this is what the model narrative looks like. I encourage you to read it because it's a good example of what we will be doing next week when we write the narrative. And then we went through and we highlighted parts of this narrative that came from the book, like the first two, having finished our tour of the Gateway Arch, and then the park ranger said, "Next car, sir." Then we underlined where we got to meet the new narrator of the story. So for example, I had a bad feeling about us being split up. I quickly hopped out of the car to stay with Percy. While my father Hypnos wasn't a warrior like some of the others, I did inherit some skills from him that might help Percy if he got into trouble. Putting people to sleep can sometimes come in handy. So that's a great example of us being introduced to the new narrator. We also find out that the narrator's father is Hypnos and that the power is putting people to sleep. We then have several more paragraphs that came straight from the text, followed by another paragraph that establishes our new narrator. Somewhere in the distance, I heard the little boy scream. This snapped me back to my senses. I had to pull myself together to protect Percy and the innocent tourists. I felt in my pocket for my drawstring bag of sleeping powder. The powder was a combination of dried jasmine, lavender, and valerian root. One of the few tips my father taught me. The texture of the chapped velvet bag brought me some relief. All right, on the second page of the narrative, we have more that came from the book about the chimera. Then we have several paragraphs in a row from our new narrator, again referencing the sleeping powder, the drawstring bag in the pockets, and when Parker, the new narrator, that's the character's name, which is a very clever way of inserting the name into the narrative. It's going to be tricky since you are telling this story from this new character's point of view. So this is a great way that they did it. In a flash, the chimera turned and ran toward me, teeth gnashing, ready to bite. Percy yelled a warning. Parker, watch out for the fire. Right on cue, the chimera opened its mouth, emitting a stench like an overused barbecue pit. The chimera shot a column of flame straight at me. So this is good to reference in the future when you are writing this narrative, trying to figure out how do I get to my narrator's name into this narrative. We have one more paragraph that came directly from the text. And then the conclusion of this narrative, all from our narrator's point of view, establishing that point of view. So please take some time to read through this entire model narrative and just to understand how it's going to be done and how to work your character into it. The next part is just discussing what and how we identify the different parts of the narrative. And then we got to our exit ticket, which is the narrative writing checklist. So everybody made a copy of this narrative writing checklist. We did not do any work on the checklist itself today, but this is good for us to reference as a rubric for how this narrative will be graded next week. So characteristics of an effective narrative. I effectively use information from sources to craft the character settings or events in the narrative. Events in the narrative are clear and connected. I use details and description to engage the reader and to introduce the reader to the narrator. You can continue on. Please read all of those characteristics. And then the assignment here is simply to respond to these questions about the checklist in the text box. What did you notice? What did you wonder? What from the checklist was done well in the model?